Good evening, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. My name is Abdul Kareem the One. I am the president of the Central Jersey NSBE Professionals chapter. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for signing up to our first webinar of 2017. Thank you once again. We're just going to give some people a little bit more time to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Just a brief reminder, if you have any questions throughout this webinar, please hold them towards the end, and then we'll answer those questions later on. Just a few other brief notices or events for upcoming for this year. We have our Jersey City Public School chapter that has recently opened. And we're looking for volunteers, so anyone who's interested in participating, you're more than welcome to contact myself at info at cjnsbe.org. All right, thank you once again, and we're just going to give people a little bit more time to join the webinar. All right, thank you once again for joining. We'll go ahead and get started with the webinar. This is Abdul Kareem Dewan, President of Central Jersey NSBE Professionals, and I'd like to welcome you to the Lean Six Sigma webinar. And as you can probably tell by the advertisements for this webinar, we are just making references to the different types of belts that are presented in the Lean Six Sigma program. And we have our presenter for tonight. Her name is Mikala Wyndham. She has a background in supply chain operations and leadership with the energy industry. She currently serves as a global logistics and the distribution business delivery and spend optimization manager for Baker Hughes. Mikala's distinguished career further includes over 9 years of experience with top oil and gas service companies, building upon a Bachelor's of Science in Agricultural Systems Management, Texas A&M University, and an MBA from University of Houston Downtown in Organizational Leadership and Supply Chain Management. Mikala's experience is in Lean Six Sigma methodologies, driving excellence, and organizational leadership with over 14 years of experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mikala Wyndham. Mikala?
Thank you, Abdul. Hi, everybody. Good evening. I want to get started. Give me just a moment and I'll be sharing our presentation with you for the evening. All right. What I want to talk about with you this evening is just a brief overview of Lean Six Sigma, as well as kind of how it came to be, the main differences, and then share with you how you can apply this on your own jobs, as well as some potential career paths should you decide you want to do this as a career, a way you can get some more training, as well as share with you a case study on how some of these results came to be in real life. And I'm going to go in a variety of different ways because I want to show you how Lean Six Sigma can be applied to truly any part of the business. So we'll dive right in. So when we talk about Lean Six Sigma, we're really talking about two different things. We're talking about lean, which I'll go into a little bit more in detail in a little bit. But the major focus is to eliminate waste and improve flow. And then when we're talking about Six Sigma, we're talking about reducing variation and improving process capability and reliability. So they really are two different things, but oftentimes you hear them talked about jointly. So why do people want to learn about Lean Six Sigma? This is not new. Lean Six Sigma is not new by any means, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But it's important for you, not only in your work life, but it can really be applied in your personal life as well. Anything that has a process, you can eliminate waste from. So even in everyday tasks, so things like understanding customer needs, identifying business information, even brainstorming and solving issues. Anything that truly has a process has waste and it has defects. So therefore, it can be streamlined. And the more you understand what these tools are and how they came to be, the better off you can be as an active team member and even moving forward as a leader or a project manager, should that be what you want to do in the future as well. So when we talk about Lean Six Sigma and process improvement, we're really seeking to remove the causes of the defects and the variations. This is where the two come together. This is why Lean Six Sigma process improvement comes into play. We focus on outputs that are critical to the customer. So that's sort of just an overall summary of what the Lean Six Sigma is. But what I'm going to tell you about in a little bit more detail is the background. How did we get here? So starting with lean, some of you may be familiar with the Toyota production system, and we know that it came about because in the 1940s, basically Toyota was on the verge of bankruptcy, and a man by the name of Taichi Ono was inspired by a few observations that he made in a trip to America, where he was observing Ford's assembly line as well as the Indy 500, what they call rapid changeover, and also the grocery store. And this is something that not a lot of people know about, where they used pull signals to know how and when stock on the grocery store needs to be replenished. So how did we get from Six Sigma to Lean Six Sigma? Well, some people may be familiar with TQM, or Total Quality Management. And then from the same time, you had Six Sigma being formed and was really being, I would say, perfected more so by Motorola and GE. And as we've talked about, Six Sigma really focused on reducing variation, reducing defects, where lean manufacturing, and I say lean management, if you will, focuses on striving for continuous improvement and reduction of waste. You're going to hear me say that over and over again because it's really important to understand the difference between the two. The better you understand the difference between the two, the better you understand how the two can work together to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Lean can really help you establish a standard by reducing waste. Once you've established your standard, you can begin to measure your variation and reduce your defects. And hence, that's the reason you can use your Six Sigma process improvement to make your further continuous improvement. So that's why they work well together. So that leads me to talking about lean versus Six Sigma. So lean tends to be used for shorter, less complex problems. It's usually time driven. And as I said before, it's focused on eliminating waste. What do I mean when I say waste? I'm going to talk to you about that in just a moment. Six Sigma is more analytical. It's very data driven. And it usually, the more data you have, the more successful the measurements of your Six Sigma projects are going to be. Waste elimination basically means eliminating the opportunity to make a defect. And less rework can lead to faster cycle times. So that's how the two, again, can work very well together. So let's talk about the path to lean. So lean has a path. We first have to define value. Value is what is important to the customer. So the customer is the person who is the customer for that process. That's why I say lean can actually be applied to any process. If you think about this in not only theory, but in application, every single process has a customer. Then you need to identify the value stream. What process steps does it take to get from the beginning to the end, where the end is delivered to the customer? You can be talking about making a product, or you can be talking about providing a service. Everything has a process. So if we remember that everything has a process, then we need to know that you got to make that process flow. Keep the work moving at all times. Then let the customer pull. What do I mean by that? I mean, do not start making anything or do not start a process until you've been asked to. And the reason that is you don't want to make more than the customer is asking you for. You're anticipating a demand for something that might not be there. And then you pursue perfection. So what I like to say is you pursue perfection, understanding that perfection will never be achieved. That's continuous improvement. So you're constantly going after a bit of a moving target. So it's a bit of a try it, tweak it, try it, tweak it. And you move the needle forward towards perfection a little bit every time. So very flow focused. You focus on eliminating non-value added steps. And non-value added means anything that the customer doesn't consider a value. So I told you we'd talk about waste. So I broke this down in some healthcare examples because I'm sure everybody has maybe been to a hospital or knows somebody that's been to a hospital. So you may have experienced some of these things yourself or know somebody who's experienced some of these things. So I made it a little personal because I think it can help you understand the waste that you might see in your own lives. So if you read the red letters down the side, they read Tim Woods. So these are what we call the 8 deadly waste. And so the first being transport, and we'll just look at one example of each of these. So when we're talking about a hospital, we're thinking about moving patients from room to room. We're transporting patients from room to room. That's a waste because the customer really doesn't want to pay to be moved around from room to room. Inventory. You might have overstock medications or things sitting on the floor in the hospital. If you've walked down a hospital, I'm sure you might have seen things sitting in the hallway. I know I have. Motion. If somebody's in a patient's room, and I don't know how many times I might have seen a nurse have to leave to go get something and then come back, and then leave to go get something and then come back. That's different from transport because transport is when you're actually transporting the patient in this case. Motion is when they're going back and get the tool or the supply that they need in order to do the job. Waiting. I'm pretty sure I don't have to describe waiting. We've probably all experienced that. The entire waiting room at the hospital, that's pretty much waiting. Overproduction, multiple signature requirements, the 8 copies of the same paper that you might have had to sign, that's overproduction. Overprocessing, this might be very similar to the extra copies of the form, but instead of signing extra copies of the form, it might be unnecessary carbon copies that don't go anywhere. So that's what you might call unnecessary or over processing. Some of you might have seen them print a lot of labels that go on various things for the patient. They might go one on the wristband, one on the medication, and then there might be 5 or 6 labels sitting there that don't really go on anything at all. That's overprocessing, and those usually end up getting disposed of. Defects, this is things that can be very, very costly for hospitals. They can be infections, uh, misdiagnosis, complaints, anything of that sort. And then the last one is skills, or I like to call it non-utilized talent. And that's not really using people in their right role that they need to be in. Or that might be a doctor that's having to search for his own supplies because they weren't where they needed to be. That doctor's not being paid to search for supplies. So that's not a very good use of his time. So that's a waste. So those are the waste that we're trying to remove when we think of lean. Now, when we think of Six Sigma, we think of the DMAIC model. And when we look at that overview, it's a little bit different from lean. And we talk about define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Wherein define is just like it sounds. That's really your foundation, your discovery phase. You really want to identify what is the opportunity, what is the problem that I'm going after. And in the measure phase, it's where you're really, just like it sounds, you're measuring, you're beginning to collect your data. And you could spend a lot of time in the measure phase, and you want to make sure that you don't spend too much time in the measure phase because you could really get stuck here. But you also want to make sure that you define good customer requirements. One of the key successes to both Lean and Six Sigma is that you have a good understanding of what the customer requires for success. After you've moved past measure, you move into analyze, where you're going to analyze the data that you've collected, look for root causes, and use some of the other various Six Sigma tools that we have to really understand where you need to go in the improvement phase. And that's where you're actually going to begin to make your changes. And then in the control phase is where you're going to work things into your process that create the process stable. And you're looking for stability. You're looking to put in process controls that can make the process more sustainable over time. So the goal of Lean Six Sigma is to prevent defects by reducing variation and to meet the customer requirements, and also to prevent defects by centering the process. That's really what our goals are when we use both Lean Six Sigma in conjunction together. So I just want to touch on a few key aspects when we're talking about Lean, and then I'll also go over a few key aspects of Six Sigma. Well, we talked about the fact that Lean is not new. It's been around for some time. For some reason now, it's just starting to really catch on. But as I mentioned, it focused on eliminating waste. In Japanese, it's referred to as muda. But I really want to drive home that that's in every area of the business, not just manufacturing. It could be customer relations, product design, procurement, a factory. Remember, anything that has a process. The goal is to have less effort, less inventory, and less time, and to do it in less space. So basically, the goal is to be more efficient. And Lean focuses on customer defined value. I told you if the customer is willing to pay for it, then we consider that a value added activity. When we look at the key aspects of Six Sigma, once again, the Six Sigma is not new. I think we've probably heard it a little bit more than we have heard people talk about Lean, although they're just as old together. But basically, what we want to remember here is that variation is bad. So what we're looking to create here is both a repeatable and a predictable result. And that's what Six Sigma is driving home. Again, it too has a customer focus. So we must view both processes and problems from the customer's perspective, both internal customers and external customers. And same here, Six Sigma is not just for manufacturing or large businesses. Successes can be found in all kinds of processes and all kinds of businesses. And as I've mentioned to you before, the two are not mutually exclusive. They do work well together. What you have to begin to ask as you begin to learn more about Lean Six Sigma on your journey is, what tool or what technique do I need to take out of my toolbox, my Lean Six Sigma toolbox, that's going to be best to solve my problem? So what makes a good Lean Six Sigma project? That's important to remember, because a lot of times people will say, well, I don't know if I have a Lean Six Sigma project. Pretty much anything can be a good Lean Six Sigma project. It's about how you structure it. So here's a few things for you to keep in mind, and you'll get a copy of this presentation for your review later. But a few things I want to highlight is there's no known solution. If you know a solution, you don't have a good Lean Six Sigma project, because that takes the brainstorming process out of the equation, and that's never a good idea. So you can't come in there with a known solution. The problem is complex, and it needs some sort of statistical analysis. The process is repeatable. You need to be able to measure the process to be able to collect some data. And then typically the project needs to be able to take around 3 to 6 months. This can vary, but you need to be able to have time to be able to work through your full DMAIC model. And there needs to be data available, or you at least need time to be able to begin to track that data if there's none available. So these are just some of the potential areas that I've seen personally, some high areas of Lean Six Sigma project focus. These are not the only areas where you could have project focus, but these are some of the areas that I've seen. So a lot of people say, what, you've seen health and safety? I have. I've done health and safety Lean Six Sigma projects. I've done IT Lean Six Sigma projects on cost of computers, revenue. We're talking about things from capital equipment needs. You can almost do a project, a Lean Six Sigma project, on just about anything. If it has a process, you can do a project. So before we move on into our case study, I just want to go over a few key takeaways over what we've reviewed already. Every person has a hand in generating job profit, and in turn, job security. A lot of people are concerned about their job security. You can play a role in that, and Lean Six Sigma can help you play a role in that. I know there's been many times I've contributed to my own job security because of my Lean Six Sigma knowledge. I've been able to be a valuable asset to a couple of companies that I've worked for because of my Lean Six Sigma knowledge. It's not solely about statistics, but it's about being able to have a very successful method to be able to continually improve and be a continual problem solver. I'm known as somebody who can continually improve and be able to solve a problem systematically that is set before me. It can provide you different tools and techniques that can be used anywhere. This is applicable in any company, any single company. And then it also is very team based. So it requires analytical thinking, driven based decision making, and also team building as well, because you're going to have to work a lot in a team. So it can make you into a good leader as well. It can give you a lot of visibility, and it can also work well with a strong technical background like engineering. So what I'd like to cover now with you is a little bit of a different case study. Um, in and this one's a little bit older, but it's good because I like it because it's in financial services. And so I just want to give you an interesting example from Europe of what can be done when lean is applied a different way. So what we're talking about is, I'll give you a little bit of a background of the company. Aviva is a piece of insurance group, the fifth largest insurance group, with 51,000 employees and 31 million customers worldwide. It's the UK's largest insurance group, and it's a part of Norwich Union Life. And the market share is about 13%. Their products include things like pension, life insurances, mortgages, for both brokers, individuals, and corporations. They have over 250 products, 30 systems, 2.7 million postal items received, and an excess of 42 million images created, and over 5 million calls to the contact center and 23,000 calls per day. So this is the operations of that business. So this is just a snapshot of their data. So what the challenge was here, and this was from 2003, is that some of the customers and the staff were losing confidence in their call center. So we're talking about basically a call center here and customer service. So they did a major overhaul of some of the single business processes that they had, the new, what they called the life of the new business. And I would just want to, I'm not going to go over everything in whole, but they went into 13 lean work streams and 26 Six Sigma projects to do this over the course of about a year, I believe it was. A 243% return on investment, in 3 years on the initial return on investment. Over 70 staff was trained in a variety of skills. So how did they do this? They established the core skills that each team needed in the first wave of their excellence. And they focused on the customer experience, the process, and the financials. So their focus was to lead with lean for waste removal and cycle time. Cycle time is the time it takes to actually get a certain process completed, and improve their speed of execution. Then they decided to follow that closely up with Six Sigma for defect elimination. So the reason I like this case study is because this is a good example of how Lean and Six Sigma can work well together to accomplish large return on investment for a corporation on a process which many people think is not applicable to Lean Six Sigma. We're not talking about a manufacturing floor here. So they started with the current state value stream maps. I agree with this. I always like to lead from the value stream level. Then they did a couple of Kaizen events that's more lean driven, or what we call just do it. And then where it says DMAIC, that's where they begin their Six Sigma journey. So you kind of see their path and how long it took them here. And DFSS is designed for Six Sigma. So they were running all of this in parallel with all of the people that I mentioned in the beginning that they had trained. So what did that look like 1 year later? What you see here is a very large map, and I'm not going to go into detail here. But what I do want to bring your attention to is the highlights in red. They reduced their number of steps for the new business life from 32 to 10. That's a 25% increase in productivity and a 50 to 70% reduction in average cycle time. That's huge to do in 1 year. What else did that look like? So for the process cell, there was other improvements. Document scanning. So we're talking about a document room that scans in documents. An 80% reduction in cycle time. It went from 3.5 hours to 30 minutes. A 45% reduction in space, a 50% reduction in travel distance, a 40% improvement in productivity. Basically, work previously done by 13.5 people is now being done by 8. Now, that doesn't mean that you lay those people off. Lean is not about laying people off. That's important to remember. That means you free up those staff to be able to go do one, what they originally needed to do because they may have been non-utilized talent, or you retrain them to go do what you actually need them to do. And let's look at some of the improvements from the pictures. You can see on the left, or I'm sorry, the pictures on the top and on the left-hand side are the before, and on the bottom right-hand corner are the same room after they just did some simple 5S improvements. Just some simple improvements on what can be done. I'm pretty sure that was a room that nobody wanted to work in prior to the improvements. So some of the key learnings that they had through this is that you can catch some rapid momentum with Lean Six Sigma. Just something like that room that I showed you with those pictures. That can catch a lot of people's attention, and it can create some good positive interaction for the workspace, and that can be very important when you need to work on a project. And it's important to remember that it is going to be hard work, but continuous improvement is about continuing to strive for that perfection and to determine that leadership. And you will fail at times, but it's important just to try and to continue to try. It's not about being 100% correct. It's important to get, even if you can get 80% of the way there, try something, tweak it, try it again. So if you decide that you want to continue to further your, you want to learn more about this and further your opportunities for training in these areas, there's a couple of different ways you can find out more. I myself am certified through what you see at the bottom, the Lean certification, ASQ, AME, Shingo Institute, and SME. I am Lean Silver certified and a Master Six Sigma Black Belt. So I've provided you the link there where you can learn more about the Lean certification. If you're interested in just going down the Six Sigma route, I do suggest getting an external certification by somebody, say the American Society for Quality. I do know that a lot of companies offer internal certifications, but if you decide that you want to take your career elsewhere, it's going to be hard to get that certification recognized. So I do recommend an external certification that's recognized by a credible organization such as ASQ. And I also recommend, if you decide that that's something you want to continue to pursue, stay up on that craft. I am also a trainer and a certifier with the SME organization. So I continue to get credits and certify those hours and continue to train others just like we're doing tonight so that I continue to stay on my craft to continue my certification as well. NSBE in the past has offered the bronze SME certification. I've taught that at the PDC 2 years ago. And we recently did a yellow belt at the TPC last year. I don't yet have the information on the trainings that we may be offering at the PDC coming up in Kansas City. But as soon as we have that information, Abdul will be getting that and he can feed that your way. Just want to leave you with a few things that I did come across. I did a little bit of research on some of the most popular employer names for Lean Six Sigma certifications, and these are some of the names that stand out. If you notice that these are also a lot of the names that are heavy supporters of our NSBE organization as well. So do remember that and take that into account. Also, you'll see most popular cities for employees with Lean Six Sigma certifications. This is by no means a comprehensive list. These are just some high-level examples for you. Also, on the right hand side, you'll see a variety of positions that highly value Lean Six Sigma certifications. And again, it is not limited to just these positions, but these are ones that it can definitely find value from these various positions at this time in your career path. So at this time, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and I'd be more than happy to take your comments and questions.
All right, thank you, Makala, for that excellent presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm pretty sure you have some really good information to at least start to judo flip some of those wasteful processes out of your life and out of your career as well too. So at this time, we'll open up the room to our Q&A session. If you have any questions, just feel free to type it in the chat box, and we'll do our best to get them answered. And as Mikala said, this information will be presented again at the upcoming national convention in Kansas City, the 2017 national convention, NSBE National Convention. So definitely be on the lookout for the agenda for the convention. And if you're interested in pursuing this further, feel free to reach out to Mikala via her email address. I'll type in the chat box. Well, actually, I'll send out an email after this webinar with her information, and and also will be available to you at the convention as well. All right, so we have one question. So the question is, what is the typical price range for Lean Six Sigma training sessions?
Okay. It can definitely vary depending on if you're seeking just a training session like the yellow belt, or if you are seeking a full-on certification. Abdul, do you remember the price for the yellow belt that you did?
I believe it was $100. Oh yes, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually got my yes, the yellow belt from last year's professional development conference. I believe it was like roughly $100.
Right. So a yellow belt is a good start, and that is definitely a deal. You cannot go externally and get a yellow belt certification in one day, nonetheless, for $100. So typically, um, you're going to probably have to try to go for 2 days, and it could be anywhere from $600 to $1,000 for a session like that. Um, but
I didn't know I was getting that much of a discount. That's great.
yeah. Um, Now, to seek out the full-on certification, there's other things involved, like the bronze certification. Um, but I believe we did when we did it. You had to attend both sessions And so there was two parts to it. There was a part at PDC and a part at TPC. And then we did webinars in between because you need to get 80 hours of training total. And the way I have it set up, I had it set up where the participants, if they followed the course and read all the required material, they would be able to get those 80 hours of training in between those two conferences. And then the exam itself. So I believe it was, I want to say it was 1,500 to 2,000 total for both of those, but that was for the full-on bronze certification, which is probably the equivalent of a black belt certification, uh, where you can actually be a lean champion, um, or even you would be considered a sensei at that point, and you could put LBC after your name because you hold a lean bronze certification. After you pass the exam, get your 80 hours of credit, and defend your portfolio. So if you were to sign up with SME and do that on your own, that would cost somewhere between $6,000 to $8,000. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so just definitely some of the benefits of being an NSBE member in regards to these training and certification processes. You know, definitely is a good avenue to explore if you are interested in Lean Six Sigma.
Right. Do be careful about these online trainings that you see. If you Google things like lean training or Six Sigma training, you will see like $99 online and things like that. Do be careful of that because they may not hold credibility.
All right, and we got a response. Yes, it does answer the question. Thank you. All right, any other questions from the group? All right. Seeing no more questions, I would uh, proceed to conclude this webinar for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call, and thank you, Mikala, for presenting on the topic of Lean Six Sigma. And definitely was a good presentation in regards to process improvement and just ways we could be more marketable and more efficient in our careers. Thank you, Mikala.
It was my pleasure. Thank y'all for having me.
All right, thank you. All right, everyone, have a good night. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at info@cjnsbe.org, info at cjnsbe.org. Thank you once again, and have a good night, everyone.